Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours, where we answer your questions 7 days a week. If you have questions, of course, you can go to Makana. You can ask the questions, vote on the questions, even talk about the questions. If you don't know how to get there, you can go to officehours.global/join, sign up, and you'll start getting emails, and they will include links to Makana, Discord, and a list of all the shows that are coming up. So check that out. And if you don't know how to do that, of course, you can go to askofficehours.global. That's askofficehours.global. Let's go ahead and jump into those questions. Courtney, what do we have?
First up, Paul Wallace from Hot Springs, Arkansas, says he's going away but needs to pack for office hours. As a panelist taking the train, I have two 40-pound rolling cases and one carry-on. What's your kit?
Go, Jesse.
So one of the things, the first thing is just as much as weight is important, also size is important. So I would start with two Pelican 1510s, and what I would go with is something like a Sony ZV. I would go with kind of the smallest version of each piece of kit. So I'd start with a Sony ZV. So one with a built-in zoom lens, so you can pop it in and out, a little desktop tripod. ATEM Mini Pro is a must-have in my opinion. I would not go with the Mini; I would go with the Pro version. And whatever mic you can plug directly into either the ATEM or the ZV. That with a laptop and an Ethernet connection will get you across the finish line. I would definitely go for that Ethernet connection. That's probably more essential than a full frame camera or $1,000 microphone on your broadcast.
Next question.
Next one comes in from Douglas Carmichael. He says, when NBC's contract expires in 2030, could you see a streaming platform bidding for the U.S. Olympic rights?
Good morning.
Well, I'd say quite possibly. Beware of the Amazon. Amazon just won the rights to a whole bunch of professional league sports franchises for next season, away from other broadcasters that have traditionally had those contracts. And so it looks like they're building up their infrastructure to do some major sports production.
Yeah, go Jesse.
And also beware Disney. They're going for sports. They just scooped up the NWA, and WNBA. Am I getting the letters wrong? Someone correct me if I am.
Yeah, it is going to be more and more streaming platforms just because they have more money. So they have more money than the broadcasters now, and they're going to be more and more competitive in that area. And broadcast is not a growing business, and streaming is. And sports is one of the things that is almost guaranteed to get eyeballs. And so as a result, the streamers all want part of it. And so they're bidding on everything. So I don't know if they'll win, but I can imagine there's definitely going to be a lot of bidding related to that. Go ahead, Courtney.
I guess they could rent the infrastructure for just during the Olympics, because you got to think that the viewership is pretty high, especially considering that's a global event. And if they are wanting to stream it out globally rather than just the United States rights, that's a lot of people and that's a lot of infrastructure that they have to support for a long period of time, not just for the hit show that is at a certain hour. So
well, I don't
maybe
think
it's spread out,
I don't think who doing the
time.
Olympics would necessarily change dramatically. It would just be a different company paying for it. I think they'd probably work out a production. The Olympics staffing doesn't change dramatically between shows.
So the bandwidth wouldn't matter then to whoever's paying.
I mean, well, Peacock's having trouble with the bandwidth right now. So they've had some issues where people can't get on, and they took on something that YouTube has not had a problem, and I think that's largely related to the fact that the scale at which YouTube works from a live streaming perspective is pretty intense. So, but Peacock has had some supply issues, with what they're doing. So that definitely is a concern. But I think a lot of, if we're projecting out 6 years, streaming lots of live to a lot of people is going to be pretty much par for the course. So I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal by then. Yeah, go ahead, Marty.
Yeah, so traditionally there's been the Olympic Broadcasting Service, which does the core broadcast of video and play audio, like effects and such. And then every country has been awarded as rights holders So there's one broadcaster in every country. So in the U.S., it's been NBC or CBS or one of the other broadcasters, and they do the local commentary and they do features for their own country. It seems, correct me if I'm wrong here, but it seems like Peacock has taken over and is making video available to every country in all the world. I saw a listing of where you can find Peacock broadcasts for every country that was listed. So is that seems to be a change in how they're producing.
Well, and I don't even know who's watching it on broadcast at this point. I mean, you would see only, I can't even imagine the fraction of the Olympics that you would see if you only were watching on, the NBC or whatever. I mean, it's just, broadcast is so far behind now. I mean, because I'm not watching on Peacock. I'm watching it on YouTube, and I watch whatever sport I want when I want it. I watch it. I watch it time shifted or live. I don't know if I've watched anything live yet, because then I would have to sit through commercials and everything else. And so I also don't understand quite how the business model will work in the future. I don't know if they're going to force us to watch the commercials or do something else. But I find myself just scanning through them so fast that I'd much rather watch it later. It takes a little bit of the edge off. Like I watched the gymnastics yesterday evening after I already knew that the U.S. team would won, just because I didn't have time to watch it earlier. So I think that's a little bit of a it takes some of the excitement out of it, but it was still good to watch. I mean, it was still some peak human, doing something crazy. So, but I think that that's been the challenges. And again, a lot of stuff is time shifted anyway because it's somewhere else overseas. So it's kind of complicated. But I think they have to figure it out. I'll be very curious as to whether this worked out for NBC from an ad perspective, just because there's so many people watching. I guess there's enough people watching the old broadcast that you get enough ad revenue. And you have people who are paying, but I just haven't seen almost any ads the whole time. So I just find it to be interesting. Go ahead, Marty. Can't hear you, Marty.
So I was watching some replays the other day, and like surfing and such, and the opening of the event had clean video with no commentary, which was really interesting because all the beauty shots and such. And then there was commentary from a non-U.S. broadcaster. So in one of the other events, there was an Australian commentator and such. So that was kind of interesting. But I couldn't watch the opening ceremonies live, so I went and tried to watch them online. And the commercials were just maddening. Every 10 minutes, you were forced to watch 10 minutes of commercials. And anytime you skip forward in the timeline and there's no preview video, so you're just guessing, 10 minutes of commercials. It was just...
Was it worth it?
No.
The ceremony?
Well, the ceremonies were worth it, yeah, but
okay.
It was just very
I'm not a big ceremony guy in general. I'm not a big ceremony guy in
they
general.
were very unique this year.
That's a good word for them. So I thought, I felt like from a production perspective, I felt like the opening ceremony was spreading way too little jam over way too much bread. It was just thinly, there's a little bit of jam across just because it was, I don't know. I guess I feel like I just don't understand why it wasn't in the stadium. I was just kind of like, this is stringing it out was a difficult thing for me to watch. I think that was I didn't know where I was most of the time. I think that was I didn't have a reference point. Watching the parts that I watched. Next question.
Next one comes in from Munich, Germany, and Oliver Breidenbach, and he says, I need to provide a way to connect a guest Windows laptop to a large TV in a conference room without installing software. The best option seems to be HDMI wireless bridge, HDMI to a transmitter, to a receiver, and then to HDMI out for the monitor. Any product recommendations?
Courtney?
Well, it's built into Windows. If you want to go wireless, just make sure a lot of TVs, I'd say most TVs, major TVs, Samsung TVs, Sony TVs, the major brands, Hisense, I think, does this, Vizio does this. They have Miracast built into it. So as long as your TV is on the network, preferably Wi-Fi, preferably plugged in, or over Wi-Fi, you just... hit the Windows button and P on the laptop, and it'll bring up the monitors. Connect to a monitor, and there's other options down there, and you'll see under other options there, connect to a wireless display right there, and it will detect any wireless displays that are on that same network and can transmit high def picture over the over Wi-Fi to that monitor. So you could check that out. Otherwise, I would run a cable, just a HDMI cable to the monitor. You can run them up to 30 feet without any problems. I've run them without any problems. As long as it's a good cable, 30 feet. Other than that, yeah, you're going to have to go the route of transmitter and receiver, but that's kind of fraught with problems as well.
Good morning.
Yeah, we go into conference rooms all the time at clients' locations when we're doing events. And, what's the purpose? What's the use of having a monitor, a TV display in a conference room if you can't make it easy to connect to? So most of the time there is some provisions for an input to the display from somewhere in the room. There's a built-in switching system already in the facility. So I would ask your event manager or your facilities people about how to connect to that display.
David Brady said, for a permanent install, look at a Barco ClickShare. Also, Ronnie Hofsoy said Blackmagic mini converters to a cable. So I don't know how long you're trying to run it. If it's less than 15 feet, it seems like you could connect the laptop directly to it, HDMI. But if it's longer, converting to SDI, or even there's a lot of different repeaters. I think Geffen makes a lot of them that are HDMI extenders. So I don't know if you're trying to. If it has to be wireless or it doesn't, there's tons of HDMI wireless converters. So they're $50 each, and they don't run very far, and they don't run through walls. But I think JCreate makes one, and a lot of other folks make them. I have one just out of reach. I just couldn't quite get over to it. But there's a lot of different ones that will jump 20 feet. So let us know how far you're trying to jump so we can kind of figure out what the answer might be, and if it has to be wireless. Next question.
Next question comes in from Mike Edwards in Brooklyn, New York. He says, morning, everyone. What does the panel think of the Connectivity Play Audio 1U for live virtual productions for an orchestra or band, or presentations from a panel discussion? And here's a link.
Yeah, it's a really interesting product, and this is a mixture of MIDI and analog I/O. So this is, let me see if I can pull it up here. This is, that's the back end of it. This is the front end here. So you've got MIDI in and out, and it's really designed for live performance. And it has a lot of it'll do audio out as well as a lot of MIDI interconnection. It does learning, and it has some software interfaces. I looked at a little bit of their video as they walk through it. I have to say that probably should get them on for a day like this and explain how the product works, because it does look like a really interesting product. Go ahead, Marty.
Yeah, I agree. It is very interesting. It allows you to switch between multiple computers for playout really easily and quickly. And there's even a backup feature. If you're playing from two different computers and you have a fail on one, the other will instantly take over. But it is only audio. So when you ask about panel discussions, I would just keep that in mind.
Next question. Oh, can't hear you.
Sorry, I had to click 3 dots. Paul Wallace from Hot Springs, Arkansas, says, this one's out of the blue. I was just wondering if I can attach an audio file to a Google photo that will play automatically when someone views the photo.
Jesse?
Now, I don't know how to do this with a JPEG on a Google Docs file or a Google what's the name of their software, their cloud service? Anyway, what I would do, I would marry these in something like Google, their version of Keynote. So you take your picture and you take your audio, put them on one slide together, and then send that Keynote doc out to the person you want to receive it. You could also do this in editing software, but then you'd have to export a movie, and that would be a larger file than what you might want to be doing for a quick internet delivery.
Next question.
Next one comes in from Harold Williams in Portsmouth, Virginia. While looking for a control service and software, I'm concerned about distinguishing between a production device and a popular yet untrustworthy unit. What standards are there, if any?
Yeah, I think let us know what you mean by control service and software. So what are you controlling? How do you want to control it? I'm just not sure exactly what the context is here. So maybe you can ask that question again, but just let us know what you're trying to actually control there. Go ahead, Jesse.
Also, it feels like you might know which is the popular brand and which is the untrustworthy, and you're trying not to throw a certain manufacturer under the bus, but it would, it would be okay.
Yeah. Next question.
Next one from Douglas Carmichael. Would there be a router that can automatically switch between a main broadband connection and an LTE or 5G backup? I've heard the name Peplink mentioned a lot here.
Yeah, I mean, PepWave modems are what a lot of us use for that. So it's PepWave or Peplink networks, and the product itself is a PepWave. I'll see if I can pull some of these up here. There's so many, so that you can take advantage of. Here's a couple of examples of them. But these are and I believe these will work. So these are cellular routers. These will actually bond cellular as well as that. But there's many options for these, and most of us have used these. Aruba makes, I think, a couple of them as well, and even Meraki have cellular. There are cellular options in Meraki. Some of the small. I don't know if they all have it. I know like the MX64s do. But you can definitely have that inside of a mobile router where the cellular bandwidth is one of the options that you have. So you could have multiple LAN connections, as well as sometimes with some of these they'll grab onto Wi-Fi as well as cellular, and you can use them all inside of that router. The most common thing that we do with those, with the Peplinks, is that we take over the WAN connection at a venue, and we give the cellular back to the venue, so we can do the best case as best we can do. That way, we get the hard line, and they still have enough internet that no one complains for at least the duration of the show. So, but the Peplinks are very popular in that environment. Next question.
Next one's a QR code question coming in from Charles Leftwich in Washington, D.C. Says, have you all tested any compatible audio control services with Vectar? My goal is to connect something like a JLCooper Eclipse MXL 8 fader controller to work with Vectar. Any suggestions or insight would be appreciated. We haven't tested that yet, but it is something that's on our list. So right now we're kind of in minimal viable product mode with Vectar, but we are definitely moving towards being able to have more control of those with control surfaces. So I think that is on our list of things to test. We'll probably test by the end of the summer. Go ahead, Courtney. I haven't heard of Vectar before. Is this a new universal control protocol?
Vectar is what we're using. That's what we're using for Monday nights. So the extra hours is running the cloud.
VizRT's Vectar.
The VizRT Vectar. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So that's the editing system. It's basically a TriCaster in the cloud. So, yeah. Next question.
Comes in from Paul Wallace in Hot Springs, Arkansas. Apple on Monday released the first version of the Apple Intelligence in the developer beta of iOS 18.1. Siri just got smarts. How do I join up?
I don't think the Siri AI has been updated yet. So I think that's still in the work. And I think that there is a sign up within, I believe, the developer platform. I don't know so you have to go to the developer beta, and there is a sign up to open it up within the interface there. And it's coming out right now. I hear that it's about a couple hours to get approved, but that may change as it starts to roll out. So, it looks interesting. I think that most people I've talked to said, it's pretty cool. The text tools work well. There's still a lot that hasn't been released. So I don't think, I don't know if Siri has gotten any better yet. Next question.
Next question comes in from Craig Kadoki in Toronto, Canada. He says, has anyone looked to TestFlight app Lapz, Lapz? It is working in beta for F1 race viewing app for Vision Pro that gives you a 3D track with video and track position data. And he has a link for you Vision Pro people.
I think Apple has shown this a couple times, and it looks really amazing. I haven't tried to get on the beta yet. for this, but I'm not. The F1, I want to see the visualization of it, and so I haven't just had the time to put this one on. But I think that I know I've seen some demos and Apple's shown it off a couple times, and it looks amazing. So this is going to allow you to visualize a lot of different tracks, I believe, what it does is, what's interesting about it is that the F1 racers all have a lot of telemetry of exactly where they are, what their engine's doing, all that telemetry is being is available to F1 at least. And as a result, there's an enormous amount of data that can be driven into an app like this that can give you very precise data position, so on and so forth, of the F1 racers, which really lends towards doing something pretty exciting here. Go ahead, Courtney.
And don't we have a Vision Pro special coming up here on office hours for all the members of the Vision Pro community? And we're going to have a lot of our panelists joining on Vision Pro. Is that right?
We are. Maybe we'll be able to show it then. This is what it looks like here. You can see kind of let's see if there's an app preview here. I lost my mouse. There we go. So you can see this visualization of a track that is being rendered here, and it does look like let's see. Hopefully it's not too. Let's see. There we go. So you can see that you can put up the racing. You can put the racing here. You can see the track here. The only thing, my only complaint with a lot of these is that a lot of them are done by folks that I feel like just learned how to use 3D. And this one feels a little bit like that now. I mean, so what's really cool is you can put all these camera views there. The track itself, I just wish it had more detail. Like from a 3D perspective, it's good. But it could be so much better, And so that's my complaint about the track. The track looks cool. It's got the detail, and I'm sure it's accurate. And being able to see all these things going around it is really nifty. I do think that they could put more into the textures. That's all. And it's becoming kind of a common complaint of mine as a CG artist that folks aren't taking it to the next level on the textures. Everything looks good, like good where we were in the mid '90s, and we don't need to. We could go a lot further than that. Next question.
Next one comes in from Douglas Carmichael. He says the musician Espen Kraft has spoken highly of the effects in his Yamaha DM3 mixer and has used it as an effects unit on its own. Ever used a mixer's internal effects for a specific sound?
Go ahead, Marty.
Well, Yamaha has prided itself on its effects, and they've had some assistance with some really, really famous people like Rupert Neve, for example, working on their electronics. As an artist, if you're using a mixer like that in your creation workflow, then of course, it's one of the easiest things to do. And then you're not looking at plugins and you're not looking at, wave servers and things like that. However, most of the time when you're creating music and mixing music, you're working within the DAW, and all of your effects are in the DAW, which means that it's repeatable, and all of the settings and stuff are all in the DAW. If you're using effects that are in the mixer, then you really can't. You have to have that mixer in order to recreate that mix later down the road. So it's one of the things you'd have to think about.
Next question.
Next one comes in from Tony Mobley in Noonan, Georgia. Says, I'm using an SPX for House of Worship only for myself. I have 10 sets. How do I share with 4 other worship leaders Zoom Pro account?
I'm trying to think about what you're doing there. You're using the SPX. I'm sorry. It took me a little while. I was trying to figure out how to use SPX as a graphic, but you're using the Zoom implementation of SPX in there. And I think that you would need to. I think the challenge there is that they need to have it in their account. So I think that the way the licensing works, if I'm correct, is that they have to have SPX on their personal account. It doesn't matter how many sets you have, they have to have it on their account. And because they have to log in, as the way that the licensing works is that they have to log into Zoom, and those apps are available to the person who logged into Zoom. And so I think that they would have to get it on their own. And I assume what you're talking about is that you're trying to put lower thirds on everyone inside of a native Zoom app. I think that you may find that to be adding a lot of complexity for many of your participants, many of the other worship leaders. I would really think about. I guess if they have to do that, I just feel like that may be more than they're ready to do. I may think about, if I were you, I may think about trying to do a production, so to speak, pull them all into a production and then have them broadcast that out, as opposed to doing it, trying to, what you're doing is you're putting the complexity on the edge. You're having the user have to have that complexity. And that's usually the part that we have a tendency to try to avoid, is having any end user have to think about pretty much anything. So we want to do all the complexity in the central area where we do the show. So I think that you may find this to be, it would be difficult. Like, it would be difficult to get it to work consistently all the time, unless the folks that are doing it are pretty technical. That's my 2 cents. Next question.
Next one comes in from Craig Kadoki in Toronto, Canada. He says, thoughts on this type of 3D printed cable management system? It's open source with free files. Would you use it?
Go ahead, Marty.
Ooh, this is a really interesting find. Thank you, Craig. So this is all open source. It's 3D printed cable management and general storage. So the video that Craig posted, the link to the video, is about cable management, say, under a desk, where you've got all these wires going back and forth, and how do you manage them? I've had to deal with this many times. We all do. And so this is really interesting to be able to print everything that you need to do. And it starts with this honeycomb backboard. Then you can print all these different parts. There's cable management parts, there's connectors, there's power strips and stuff like that. And then you can use it for a pegboard at your workbench. It's a really interesting system that I'm definitely going to look at. I may need to buy a 3D printer finally.
Go ahead, Courtney.
It's going to be expensive. You're going to burn through a lot of filament in this. If you do have a lot sitting around that you're not doing anything with, sure, why not? You can print anything. But for some of those longer, for that little lattice that Marty showed there, that lattice with the snap-in parts that kind of snap into that lattice, that'd be kind of interesting for underneath the table or on the privacy panel to put it there to manage all those loose cables that end up being coiled up on the floor, get them off the floor and up onto that panel. That's a great idea. And that's unique. But as far as the little cable raceways that run along the baseboards and then up to an outlet to handle your AC cables or your network cables, there are cheaper solutions than printing them out. And the problem is most 3D printers, can't print anything longer than about 8 to 12 inches. So making 36 inches or 22 feet of cable raceway like that is going to take you a long time to print out. And you can go to Home Depot and get those things. Are designed to conceal cables, have double stick tape and screw anchors built into them. And, it'd be a lot cheaper and a lot easier just to buy off the shelf for that stuff. But the little lattice thing, I could see printing that out.
And this is the core website, multiboard.io. And it is it's kind of an amazing collection of stuff. I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to be able to resist. I don't know if I'm going to be able to resist building this to print these and get the printer running. My nozzle's a little dirty right now, so I'm trying to. As soon as I get the nozzle fixed, I'll start printing some of these and see how they turn out. Go ahead, Marty.
Yeah, I agree with Courtney that the raceways can be expensive to do, and they're easily and inexpensively available from Home Depot and other places. But if you can find a way to attach a commercially available raceway to this lattice board, then that would be a nice combination.
Next question.
Next question comes in as a QR code question from Chris Widner in Indianapolis, Indiana. He says, I have an acquaintance that lost access to their YouTube channel. The scammer that got access to put up crypto scam videos and deleted all the old channel content. YouTube has been no help in trying to recover the account. Any suggestions?
Jesse?
So it's really hard to convince these companies to help you out with a problem like this because there's no return on that investment. It's a lot of work for them, and they are focused on the cash flow and that's working for them. And I don't have any rear-facing solutions for you, but as your friend moves forward, consider archiving everything diligently. So they need to be able to have every video that they can re-upload. You don't have to archive in a mezzanine codec. You can archive in H.264 if it's just for a YouTube channel, just for socials. But you want to have all that stuff on at least 2 hard drives so that if this happens again, they can upload it. Also, diversify your portfolio. So a lot of people build entirely on one platform, and then if something like this happens, their audience doesn't know where to find them again, really. So you want to have your audience on YouTube. You want to have them reflected on Twitter. You want to have them elsewhere that they can find you easily if they need to. Patreon is a really, really good place to assemble your audience. And that will make it easier for people to find you again in the event that something like this happens. And I'm sorry I don't have any back-facing solutions. This is all forward-facing, looking into the future. And I wish you guys the best of luck in recovering.
I asked somebody that might know about the answer for this, and the response is people get frustrated with the process, but basically you have to prove that you own it, because otherwise people could use the recovery process to steal channels. Basically, like, you have to prove you own an iPhone for Apple to get you to unlock it for you. If they can't use the recovery page, they have to ask YouTube for the form that they will fill out for the recovery process. It takes a while, and people often get impatient and complain no one is helping, but they really have to go through it. So that's the semi-official answer to your question. So I think that's the one that's what you want to think about there. Next question.
The next one comes in from Tlaloc Lopez Waterman in Brevard, North Carolina. He says, could you list your favorite light meters and color temperature meters? I imagine that budget and accuracy are inversely proportional, so don't hold back. What is trusted?
I'll go, Jesse.
Now, my answer is a little bit limited, and that's because light meters are very expensive, and we just don't have the budget to play with a wide variety. But I will talk a little bit about the one we use. That is the Sekonic Lightmaster Pro, and we're quite happy with it. If we were buying again, though, we would not have cheaped out. This just has an ambient light meter, and we really, really, really should have gotten the one with the light meter and the spot meter. And you can see by the prices, it's a significant jump, but the value that you get from that jump, it's reflected in your day-to-day work when you're using a light meter.
Good, Courtney.
Yeah, I was going to suggest the Sekonic as well, but yeah, you might want to get a spot meter as well. I used to have a Pentax spot meter, which was great for reading out monitor levels on a set when trying to balance multiple monitors to get them to be exactly the same brightness when photographing them with a film camera. So take that into account. And I can't remember the name of the color temperature meter, but Luna Pro was also a nice incident light meter that a lot of famous DPs that I worked with over the years were using. That love to use the Luna Pro, so I'll say those. They've changed, of course, dramatically since the invention of digital electronics. Used to be little meters that you used to have calibrated all the time, but because the meter, you dropped them and you'd have to have them recalibrated. But that doesn't happen anymore because it's all just digital pixels.
And Sekonic can go, there's a lot of Sekonic products, and that's pretty much, they are the standard for this. This is the spectrometer, and you can see that it's not only showing you the, a spot or an ambient level, but all the different colors and the representations there. So, but the prices, as you can see, go up pretty quickly. I would say that Sekonic is the industry standard. I very rarely see anything else being used on a set. Next question.
Next one comes in from our friend Guy Cochran in Seattle. He says Atomos Shinobi II can control most mirrorless cameras from Canon, Panasonic, and Sony. How does this work? And he has a link there to the product.
Courtney?
Well, I think it works. It connects over USB-C. Most of those newer cameras from Canon, Panasonic, and Sony have their own apps that they use that can be control the camera. And since it can send video out over USB-C and control signals, they just probably into this little monitor recorder from Atomos, which is a 5-inch monitor that can record and display stuff on the screen. It's a touch screen. So perhaps each of those cameras can remote their viewfinder screen to the Atomos. But further yet, you wouldn't probably want to do that if it's recording that signal. So you need to get a clean video signal out over that USB-C connector for the video for the Atomos to record, and yet have it send control signals back to the camera to control things like aperture, things like that, in an overlay that would not be recorded. So it's handy to have in that respect. And I imagine they just detect the camera and then use the protocols for each of those individual cameras. They've built something like that.
Go, Jesse.
Early Atomos recorders had mirror record, so you'd press record on the camera and the Atomos would also record. For people who are curious, this offers wider controls, including white balance, aperture, ISO, things like that. I'm not sure how it works on a protocol level, but it would be nice to experiment with it on set and see how well it works.
Mickey said that it uses the HEC circuit for control communications. I went to the Atomos site to get more information while we were talking. And unfortunately, they're having a maintenance issue. So they said today we were hoping to announce the Shinobi II, the next generation of Shinobi, that is slimmer, brighter, with added camera control. Unfortunately, we're experiencing an issue with our website that is beyond our control. So they are down. So anyway, so that's hopefully they'll get back up and we'll get some more information. Quick reminder, of course, that you can ask your questions throughout the hour. You can go to askofficehours.global. That's askofficehours.global, and throw your questions in 24/7. So any time of the day you can ask them. The key is to make sure that those questions are clear, that there's one question per post. So if you see multiple question marks in your question, probably aren't going to go through. And also, if you're combative or complaining or something like that, we have a lot of options, to ask the questions. We probably just won't pass it through. So just ask clear questions. Usually you want to be very clear and just say what you need to say to ask that question. And then oftentimes the questions will roll right through. Of course, you can still ask questions in Makana as well. You create this show by asking your questions, both in the first and the second hour. So hopefully we'll see your questions in the near future. Next question.
Next one comes in from Douglas Carmichael. He says, Usher's Rendezvous in Paris was filmed at La Seine Musicale, which is on an island in the Seine River. Considering the challenges we've seen with the Olympic opening ceremonies, wouldn't it have been a daunting task to get the gear there and back?
It's just logistics. I mean, the Olympics is a whole different level of, there are so many cameras and so many people and so many things, and you're trying to do it all live and you're trying to cut all that stuff together. It is, but we move, to islands all over the place. It's just boxes that need to get across. It's really not that big of a deal. But I wouldn't compare doing a concert on an island to be anywhere near the complexity of the Olympics. Mickey said, I've worked on more challenging productions in school. So anyway, there you go. Next question.
Next one comes in from John Snyder in Reno, Nevada. He says, if participants in a Zoom meeting choose to turn off incoming video to save bandwidth, will they still see a screen share?
I don't know. I don't know if they will see that screen share coming in because it would use a lot of bandwidth on the way in. So I'm not entirely certain as to whether, most of the shows that I do with Zoom, we don't use screen share at all. Like we're typically cutting into the video itself. So it's not it's not a behavior that I'm as familiar with as many people are using Zoom. So yeah, it'll be interesting. We'd have to test that. I never thought of it until you asked. So we'll think of it try to come up with a solution. Next question.
Next one's a QR code question coming in from across the pond from Bournemouth, Leeds, from Colin McCorkle. He says, how can we as an industry better use scalar energy or even move towards achieving some of what Tesla inculcated long ago? Should we get a scalar energy instrument to help work with the photographs and videos we take?
Yeah, I think scalar energy is still a cutting edge, idea that I think hasn't really matured yet. So I think it's probably not something we'd put in production probably for another decade or 2 or 3. But it's an interesting thought process. Next question.
Next one comes in from Tony Mobley in Noonan, Georgia. What would you recommend for the house of worship instead of using SPS extremely small group so that everyone can have lower thirds?
I mean, I guess what I would say there is that when I want to start doing lower thirds, I will typically move everybody to where I'm doing the production and I'm putting the lower thirds in for them. We have not been super successful at having reliable lower thirds at the edge. So having everybody in a system have lower thirds that work, that look good, has not been something that we've, over 10 years, over many platforms, it's always wonky, and so it is, or it's difficult because it has to be installed. I think that what I would do is I would have all of their feeds come in. I would use Zoom ISO or MIMO or whatever. I would put all the things in there and then I'd broadcast it out. I don't know if you're trying to talk to, if they have to interact with the audience, then you have to kind of figure out what that's going to look like. But I would I would keep the complexity on my end, not on their end. And so all I want people to do, generally for me, when I'm doing events, I want people to join Zoom. I don't want them to use anything. I don't want them to install anything. I want them to just join Zoom and here you go, like you're in, and then I do all the work. Because otherwise, if I don't figure it out that way, we end up spending a lot of time trying to figure out what's wrong or what's not working. And I think that's the challenge that we've had with a lot of the plugins and apps or whatever for Zoom is that unless I can force install something and have it be something that they have no control over, it's not something that I tend to do. Next question.
Next question comes in from Harold Williams in Portsmouth, Virginia. He says, we have the Behringer X32 Core, an ATEM, and 3 Sony PTZ cameras that I want to be able to control from one seat. Are there any recommendations for a hardware controller with real buttons and knobs to pair with central controls software?
Well, I think that the Sony PTZs will have their own controller, and you should use it. So there's a controller that, there's other ones too. Mickey mentioned the Scarhoy controller, but there's any Sony PTZ camera has its own controller. I would look at using the Sony controller or the Scarhoy controller. I don't know if I would try to, I don't know why I would try to pair it with central control to make that actually work. I would just I would have it as its own interface to make that actually to execute that. Yeah, I don't know. That's not a process that I would probably take on. Go ahead, Marty.
Yeah, I would definitely use dedicated controllers for PTZs because there's a lot of things such as presets and limits and speed, pan tilt speed that you definitely want to have those dedicated controls for. For controlling your X32 Core, you can use any of the controllers. Behringer's X-Touch is very popular, and then they have another line of controllers, Control 2, Monitor 1. Just look through controllers on the Behringer website. There's some new things that I hadn't seen before. Video control, audio control, sitting at one desk, perfectly fine. Just make sure you don't put too much on one surface because it can get really difficult to manage.
Next question.
Next one comes in from Kyle Hammond from Chicago, Illinois. He says to trade in or not to trade in. Is there a good reason or a use case to keep a 2015 MacBook Pro, or should I put it towards a trade-in with a new purchase?
Good, Jesse.
I would consider keeping it. We found that our MacBook Pros from the 2015 and beyond have been very useful as backups in a pinch, and worth much more to us than the $200 or $300 you might get selling it used online, or the $50, $75 Apple might give you credit towards your next purchase.
Yeah, I don't even know if you can trade it in. I don't know what it would be worth. I don't think Apple will take it back now. I think it's considered quote unquote legacy at this point. So I don't think that you can. I don't think Apple will say, "Hey, there's lots of great." I think I tried to trade something in that was old, and it said Apple kind of came back and said, there's a lot of great uses for it, but trading in is not one of them. It was some email that basically said that. And so I don't know if you can. I have a 2015 and I keep it. And the reason I keep it is I have an old operating system on it. It has old connectors. It has a lot of old things there that provide me with some backwards compatibility. I even keep machines that are older operating systems with things like FireWire 800 and so on and so forth that I can turn on, so that I know that I can get back to something if I needed to. So I find having a handful of those computers around is useful if you have to open something old. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, Apple guys, because I have two MacBook Pros from 2015. They're Intel MacBook Pros, and I have not upgraded them. Can they upgrade to the latest operating system, Sonoma, or is that only for the Apple hardware?
Yeah, I don't think that I don't know if they'll upgrade to the newest version. I think that they're probably a version or two better. I think that Apple typically, and I don't know for sure, I tend not to go that far back with them. So usually the computers that I'm using are typically less than 5 years old, just because I'm impatient. So will you have to stay with, let's say, a Final Cut Pro old version versus the newer version if the newer version's been optimized for the M3 processors? Yeah. I don't even know if Final Cut. I don't know how backwards compatible the newest version of Final Cut is at this point. I think that they're and the upgrade between M1 to M2 to M3 to whatever M4 becomes has been relatively smaller than I expected. There's not a huge difference between those processors, but the change between Intel and M1 was dramatic. And so so I don't think that I don't think I would let it go. I think I would keep it there. Mickey also chimed in and said that trade-in value is not worth letting go. Use it as a problem solver or some server of some sort, and that's what I tend to do with older computers. Is I have them doing some kind of work. But not, I don't, they supply a clock or web pages or feedback or something there. Next question. They do, Kyle. They do work really good as doorstops. I've found they work quite well. The wedge shape is very good for that. Next, coming in from Paul Wallace, on an Amtrak train as we speak. Perplexity introduced a publishers program to share ad revenue with media partners following a recent plagiarism accusations and aiming to support quality journalism in the age of AI-powered search. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what that, how that works. It doesn't look like Perplexity's paying everybody. They're just picking the ones that complained, and then solving their problem. So I'm not sure. And I think that this is going to be a real issue that we have to kind of wrestle with is how do you keep journalism alive when we're extracting the value of it very quickly with AI and simply digesting it and getting it back. And I don't have an answer for that yet. Go ahead, Courtney. And I worry, too, about monetization of these AI platforms. How soon can they be gamed like SEO has been gamed for, the search engines for financial purposes? Will it be exploited? Will these programs like this designed to compensate providers of material that are used to train AIs, how are they going to be able to track that? I don't know any way to track that. And, will it be gamed by people that say, hey, you're using my stuff, you owe me some money, when there's no way to say if it was using their stuff or not. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what Apple does related to this, because what it looks like Apple's doing is that they very quickly threw in some stuff that included publicly available content. They also give you a release valve to go to ChatGPT, but It does look like what they're planning to do is license or verify almost all the data that they're putting in and pay for that because they can, and if they do that, and they verify most or all of the content that's going into their system, the level of hallucination may lower. And if everyone else is constantly building on publicly available, the real issue that came up when we did a fireside with David Pogue was that he brought up is the idea of AI feeding back into itself. So the AI gets data, generates data from all these sources, but now that's web data that other AI is trolling for and grabs onto it. So what you're doing is the kind of the AI is eating its own output, so to speak, and so that could create a feedback loop that makes it worse. So while there's a risk that while we think that we are in the beginning ages of AI, maybe we're in the golden age, where it becomes less smart. But the system that Apple's building, I don't see a lot of other people building, is the idea that we're going to spend all the money we need to and go very slowly and build up something that you can rely on more often. And if they actually pull that off, it could be 2 or 3 years from now. It could be very hard for others to compete with that. I don't know if they're going to, and I don't know if other people will error correct, but that's a real danger for people that are just kind of going fast and furious down the path and just turning AI on and having it suck everything out of the web, because it's now sucking in things that it created, which may be less accurate than what was there before. Next question.
From Tony Mobley in Noonan, Georgia. He says, "Hey, Alex, is this what you meant about the future of theaters? The artist known as Usher is playing his Paris tour in AMC theaters in the fall."
I don't know whether Usher, is it Usher or Usher? I'm not sure.
Well, he said Usher, and I thought it was a typo.
No,
so
it's Usher. It's Usher.
It is Usher. Yeah,
okay.
I thought it was a typo.
So the question is whether that's actually live to the AMC theaters or not. I don't know if it is. That going live to theaters is a challenge, but I do think that there's a huge opportunity for artists to go live to theaters. I mean, the issue is that the ticket costs have gotten just completely out of control for a lot of these events. So you're talking about hundreds or thousands of dollars to go to see a concert where you're looking at a screen anyway. If you went to a Taylor Swift concert, you pay $2,000 and you're out in the cold looking at a jumbotron somewhere, and you can barely see her on stage. So it's pretty far away. You might as well be in a nice warm place with great audio. And I think that a theater offers 300 to 900 or 300 to about 1,000 people that can be all singing with you and being part of it. And I think Taylor Swift proved that in the AMC production that she did earlier. So I think that there's an opportunity for artists to get out there. And I think that it potentially could be both small artists and large artists if the network was flexible enough. You decide, this artist gets 10 theaters, this artist gets 1,000 theaters, or 1,000 screens. It just depends on the size of them. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I think he saw what Taylor Swift did with her Taylor Swift tour movie. And he may kick it off with a live show that goes to the theaters, but that's, like Alex said, very expensive. It'd be more practical, especially if it's not going to come till the fall. And he's taping a lot of this stuff during the Olympics. So they're probably going to put together a feature film and run it through AMC theaters like the Taylor Swift did with hers. And it made a whole lot of money.
Yeah, and it looks like that it is a movie. It's not the live experience. So this is a movie that's being distributed to 1,000 U.S. theaters and 2,000 theaters around the world. Go ahead, Marty.
Yeah, it does look like a film. However, I noticed that they are they're showing the Olympics live in a bunch of theaters, and you can buy tickets to see it in the theaters. I just looked at one event. For an event, it's $15 for an adult ticket. So that might be an impediment for some people, but it's an interesting thing to be showing the Olympics in the theater and go see it with a bunch of people on a big screen.
Yeah, I think that the problem. So I went to see a little bit of I saw some of the IMAX projection, and I think that the thing that I was struck by was TV framing and film framing is very different, and I was in a pretty optimum seat to look at it, and I just felt like, I don't know if TV on screens necessarily is a huge success in the sense that getting it to the screens is fine, but and I think also, there'll be some limitations in the, in the quality of the transmission and so on and so forth. So I think that that's a hard nut to crack. I don't know if I don't know how, it'll be interesting to see what people think of it as they go to see it. And I might try to go out to an AMC theater before this all ends and see what it looks like there. Next question.
Paul Wallace on the train again says Midjourney released version 6.1 featuring improved image quality, coherence, and text rendering, along with new upscaling and personalization models, offering faster processing and enhanced overall aesthetics. Thoughts?
Go, Jesse.
Paul, thank you for giving us, cluing me into this update. I did generate some images. We'll jump over and take a look at some of those. This is all done in 6.1 until we get to the end. So here's, how faces look. Not too much different from 6.0. Did a roadside sign with the phrase, "Don't you dare not," just to see if I could confuse it, and it did nail it on one of them. The other three have, varying degrees of error. I really tried to push it with the text stuff. So this is a magnet set of the alphabet. Not quite the alphabet as I know it, but they're trying. Pushed it very far past the edge with some Japanese kanji, requesting the kanji for water. None of these even look remotely like the kanji for water. This, is just water, not even the kanji. And just to give you some kind of baseline, I went back to version 4 to do the exact same prompt for the roadside sign with the text, "Don't you dare not." So they have come a long way in terms of rendering text.
Next question.
Next one comes in from Gordon Lake in Los Angeles, California. It says, when using large monitors with a fly pack for multi-views, what is a good size? One person can carry up to a 50-inch, but I've seen both smaller and larger ones used.
Good, Courtney.
Yeah, if you're flying with them, you got to fit them into cases that can withstand the baggage handlers, so that's going to add quite a bit to the weight. So I would say 47-inch or 42 or 47-inch is a good size. That are 4K monitors that you can put a quad split on or a multi-view on. That'll be, efficient resolution. One person can lift either one of those. They only weigh about 20 pounds or 30 pounds. And so one person can easily lift them up and hang them onto a wall hanger, or if your case transforms, can then just set them up on top of the case. That's what I would use, is a rolling case that you can pull the monitor out, put the lid back on the case, and set it on top of the case to use as a rolling monitor.
We've done two different things. So if we're truly flying with them, we actually tend to live inside of a 24-inch space. So 24-inch screens, all 24-inch screens, many 24-inch screens as needed. But we don't tend to have large monitors when we're flying, just because of exactly what Courtney talked about. So if you're talking about truly a fly kit, we tend not to fly with monitors larger than 24 inches, and that they go into our 1650s. We build them all out. When we are on site, and when we think about fly kit being, our fly pack being something that is just not a truck, then we tend to use 55-inch. And the ones that we really liked a lot for Pixel Core was we would have 55-inch, and they were in hydraulic lifters. And so you would be able to pull the case off and just push a button, and they'd come up to the height that you wanted them to be at. And they're awesome. We built them ourselves, and so they were a great experience. So 55-inch, and it turned out it was just because that's where the price shifted. Was when that was 55 was like $500 or $450, and now it's $350 or something like that. It was just, they're relatively cheap, these Samsung ones that we used. So anyway, yeah, there you go. We will be jumping into the second hour here in just a second. A couple quick announcements. Of course, tomorrow's Q&A. We'll have a Q&A for 1 hour. Friday, Jeff Keithley is going to be here to talk about procedures and protocol and the gear that he uses to secure the networks he uses in production, so the system operations security. And on Saturday Saturday, of course, is a Q&A. We also have the new panelist meeting. So if you're interested in being a panelist, the new panelist meeting will be on Saturday, and then Sunday we will have our general introspection. So stay tuned for all of that. And we have a great week coming up next week, so we'll be doing more announcements about that in a couple tomorrow and Friday.